Hi guys, how are you?
Great.
My name is Elayne Duff. I was formerly most of you guys know me as the head mixologist for Diageo. I've actually now been lured over by the beer world and their big budgets, and I am now the global event manager for the craft beer division at AB InBev. That being said, I'm always a mixologist at heart, hence why I am here. And this lovely lady is Elayne. Elayne. God, I was so close. I've said it wrong 17 times. I'm going to get it down by the end of the day. But Elayne, actually, we met yesterday.
That's true.
And now I'm taking her home with me. No, basically. But no, Elayne, my husband is very excited about this. About this. So it's going to work out well for everybody. So anyway, but Elayne happens to, we actually met yesterday and we started talking, and she happens to work at an amazing beer,
Craft beer bar.
She is the beverage director for Beerly Legal, and also the bartender at Jeffrey's, which serves craft beer as well as cocktails.
And coffee and excellent pub food.
Yes, I'm very excited to go there. I found out it's in my hood and I've never been. But as soon as we started talking, I realized, I'm like, wow, she actually knows a shitload about beer and about beer cocktails. And I've only been doing this for 4 months. So I'm learning, as you might know, Diageo didn't have a lot of beer. So this is all me learning about beer. So, but I'm really excited about it because it's all new. Right? It's all new information, and I know the one thing that we all love to drink, like after the day and the night is over, was a beer, right? You didn't, there's only so many citrus bombs you can drink, there's so many cocktails, stirred cocktails you can have, right? Exactly. So the beer and a shot became, our drink of choice. So it's really been kind of a fun, I've only been doing it now since August, and I've been learning a ton about beer. And I'm really excited about bringing all this knowledge to you guys in the industry. And working with beer cocktails obviously is a great entryway, but also just the different varietals of beer. There's just so many.
It's staggering how many.
Yeah, so it's going to be a fun journey. So if you guys will have a good time joining me. So we're going to start off a little bit just talking about why we love beer. I know I don't need to tell you, but these are the reasons why I love beer. The fact that, it's cold. We're here in Florida. There's nothing like a really good, cold, refreshing beer. But knowing what temperature to store it at is really important. Especially being here in Florida, you really should be kept anywhere. It should be kept somewhere between 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Because the one thing I did not know is that beer can go off like that. How many people here know that beer has an expiration date? All right, most people, that's good. I didn't. To be honest with you, I was like, oh, it does. I know. My husband just goes, really? I did not know. But I also didn't realize how fast beer can go bad.
Spoil.
Like if you take any beer that's in green glass or in white glass and you expose it to light, and say it was in the back of the trunk of your car and you put it in light for 5 minutes, just 5 minutes, it will actually cause it to skunk. So it can go off really quickly. So keeping it very cold and what temperature you serve it at is obviously going to affect the flavor your customer is getting. So knowing that, but also knowing that if it's too cold, you're not going to get all the complexity of all the flavors. So you don't want it below freezing. You want it to be something where it's enjoyable, you can enjoy all the flavors. But in some beers, actually like bottle conditioned beers and sour beers and bottle aging beers, they actually taste better as they warm up. So you want to actually let them sit on the table with your customer for a good 25 minutes before, or take them out about 25 minutes before, so they can actually, their flavors will actually develop in the bottle while they're sitting there.
Yeah, you'll hear me say this over and over again, but I will really make the connection between beer service and wine service. And there's so much connection between storage and temperature, and if it seems a little odd or foreign, just conceptualize it as it's wine, but maybe with grains.
Yeah,
and that's
exactly.
kind of how I like to envision it.
Exactly, and also about the beer glass, making sure, how many of you guys have a beer rinser, a beer glass rinser in your bar? How many of you guys just use it for your bar tools? Right? I didn't know what it was until I was like, oh, it's actually for the beer glass. So basically, always rinsing out. A lot of us, a lot of bars get very excited to keep their glasses in the cooler, and you're like, great, a cold glass. But actually, you always want to rinse that glass. You don't want to just serve that with the beer in it. Because you're actually going to get lots of flavors. You might get flavors from the freezer on the glass itself. And also a glass that's too cold will actually cause the beer to foam. So you always want to rinse the glass off before actually putting the beer in it to get all, the dislodged and liquid off of it, any spectacles, beer
Absolutely.
clean.
Beer clean. And you want to experience it with your senses. All of 80% of your taste is olfactory anyhow. You have front nostrils and you have back nostrils. So if it's too cold, you're muting the aromatics. So you really want those aromatics to come out and shine so that it could be a really sensory experience. You can get all the profile of the beer.
Absolutely. Now beer, this is one of the other reasons why we love beer and why it's great for cocktails. It's extremely tasty. Different beer styles are going to bring different flavors to a drink and also to the palate. So this is basically a beer pyramid. You have sweet beers, spicy, bitter. Sweet bitters tend to be like ales and porters. They have chocolate notes to them. They have coffee notes to them. They have graham cracker notes. So these are great flavor profiles to work with like bourbons and rums. And then you have things like spicy ones that tend to be like your wheat beer or your sour beers, and they have these beautiful spice notes and fruit notes they're going to bring to the cocktail itself. And then you have your bitter beers, which a lot of people thought you couldn't mix with an IPA, but you can. IPAs, and we're actually one of the drinks we're going to actually serve today is a IPA made with an IPA. But they bring citrus and licorice and mango and garlic.
I love mixing them with gin.
Yeah.
I would definitely do some kind of like Tom Collins variations with IPAs. Absolutely, any day.
So these are all the different components. So most people never think of beer is very complex, but it is. It should be something you think of as a normal cocktail ingredient because it has all these flavors to bring to the table. The other thing is beer is really complex. Right? It has all these different attributes that most of us take for granted. It has carbonation, right? Things that we usually grab for a soda, like a tonic or a club soda or a ginger beer. It brings beautiful mouthfeel, like creaminess and like what other mouthfeels could there be? I don't know.
Just velvety texture, maybe something crisp, refreshing.
Absolutely. So all these different things come into the drink. Bitterness, right, from the IPA, acidity from the sour drinks. Just the different flavor profiles we talked about before, and aroma. These are all things when you guys are making drinks, are all things you're trying to achieve. And beer, different styles of beer all have a lot of these different flavor components in it. It's just finding the right beer that goes with the right spirit.
Yeah, if you're ever in Manhattan, please drop by the Jeffrey Orful's Gold or Ale West because we have complex descriptions that are like 3 sentences for every single beer that we have. And we have 30 taps at each location.
I'm so excited.
I know.
All right, so why we also love beer? Because we like whiskey, right? And beer, what is whiskey? Whiskey is distilled beer. So this is why we love beer. They start off very similar with water, with malt, right? Malted barley, and with yeast. Obviously, there are different variations, and obviously with beer, you're brewing it, and with whiskey, we're distilling. But one of the major components is obviously hops. So hops can obviously bring lots of different flavor. Hops can bring citrus notes, it can bring pine notes, it can bring mango, garlic. I was surprised by the garlic note. Different hops have different flavor profiles. There are also hops from different regions.
Different regions. I mean, again, with respect to wine, I think about it as a varietal. There are different varieties of hops. They're going to express the terroir wherever they're from. Like we were discussing earlier, a hop from Germany is going to taste different if it's grown here in America. The ideas between grape varietals and hops is just like a one-to-one connection for me.
Absolutely. So all these different things. So every IPA is going to taste different. Every beer is going to taste different because of the different hops that they're using. But it also brings lots of complexity to your cocktail. Like if you go, and also about the terroir, like if you go, one thing that surprised me, I was just in Berlin. When you go to Berlin, you actually will then see American IPAs. And I was like, why is it an American IPA? And I realized because they're shipping IPAs, they're shipping hops from America, which are like the hottest hops on the market right now, to other countries, and they're making American-style IPAs. So you might see in America, a German IPA because they brought over the German hops to make their beer. So different things that can be transported anyway. But so popular classic cocktails that we're all very familiar with, the michelada. Everybody have one? One of my favorite drinks. The one thing I've never found is a consistent one. Right? I've been to Latin America. Well, I've been to 2 places in Latin America, Guatemala and Mexico. And it was different at every bar I went to. But the one thing I did find in common in Mexico was that they all use Mexican larder. That was the one common variation in a michelada. One of my favorite micheladas is the one that's served. Has anybody ever been to Mother's Ruin in New York? Right? You ever get a michelada there? It's hilarious. It's such a TJ Lynch thing. It's just a Tecate some hot sauce and a lime. It's awesome. So that's how simple the drink can be. But I really love it. And it's a great thing to put on your menus for, you know, I think it's a drink you can have any time of day, but, you know, definitely for brunch. A beer mimosa. Who's ever had one of those? They're great, right? They're such an easy, refreshing. They taste good with orange juice. They taste good with grapefruit juice. I happen to like mine over ice. Some people like them neat, mostly because I find them more refreshing. I do tend they work better with wheat beer.
Yeah, I would think so. With the tropical fruits from all the esters and the
Right, because wheat beers tend to have coriander and orange peels in them, so it actually is part of the brewing process. Now I know we're all probably thirsty, so we're going to get to the Boilermaker in a second, but I almost want one right now, but I'm going to wait. So a classic cocktail that you also hear about is the shandy. Now what I discovered in my research, I actually dropped the shandy and the radler were two different drinks. They're not.
No.
They're the same. No, I just got, and so basically it's a good.
I got a question. Like, grew up different ways with how to make that. Is it lemonade or is it Sprite?
It's Sprite. It's supposed to be Sprite. So basically, in England, and they call it a shandy, right? In Germany, they call it a radler, and in France, they call it the panache. And we definitely have seen it. Like in America, whenever we see lemonade, people make lemonade. It's how the Pim's Cup kept getting ruined. And I had a lot of English friends go, "It's just goddamn lemon lime soda. Why do you keep doing this drink? It's not a hard drink to make." But people do make the shandy with regular like lemon juice and simple syrup, but it is supposed to be just Sprite. So yeah, there are different ways in which this drink can be consumed, but basically it's just an easy combination, really refreshing. So much so that now they're actually putting it in bottles. You can buy it at the store.
So if the radler is a grapefruit shandy, what's the panache? Just like a Sprite shandy?
Yeah.
It's just Frenchy.
Yep. Just free and French. So yeah, we're gonna get to it. So guys, you guys are going too fast for the cocktails. All right. So cocktail components. So just like any drink, right? So you have different, from when I made a cocktail or creating drinks, I always started off with my cocktail components. What my base was, what my modifier was going to be, and what's the flavoring agent, right? So this is how I'm going to decide like what combination I'm going to put together. So the same thing applies when using beer. You want to see which spirit goes with which beer. So this is kind of like a guideline. This was based on, I was in Berlin at the bar show, and which is amazing if you ever have a chance to go to the Berlin bar show. It's the best bar show in Europe. And I was sitting in a seminar about Boilermakers. It was all in German. So I didn't really understand what he was saying, but they were sending out pairings. And basically, they would send me out a glass of beer with a tiny shot of whiskey or different spirits. And this at the end, we lined them all up so we could see which one went with this. Now, this is just a guideline.
Oh, I deviate. I deviate quite a bit. One of my favorite drinks right now that I have on the menu, I call the Leaf Peeper, and it's with aviation gin, which is really high in sarsaparilla. So I use that with pure blood orange liqueur, and then I top it with a pumpkin ale by Anderson Valley. It's delightful.
So every
so
spirit.
come visit me in New York.
Yeah, exactly. Every spirit's going to have their own flavor profile. So this is like, obviously gins all vary, whiskeys all vary. So, but this is just a starting point, and we all need a starting point. Some places says, okay, I really want to make a bourbon cocktail. I want to use a beer. What's the right beer is going to combine? We're going to make a rum drink. So this is just a great place to start, and then obviously start playing around. So speaking of that, so we have a Boilermaker in front of you. So we'll see if we were right, because this is Hoegaarden, which is a wheat beer, and this is what tequila are we drinking, Alex? Coralejo. I can finally drink other people's products. There are some freedoms that come along with the new job. So the Boilermaker, right? So the Boilermaker, typically you're supposed to drop it in. I'm a little too old to be dropping in and trying to drink this with all in one shot. But most of us drink it, it's a beer chaser, right? But there are different combinations. But there's a bar in Manhattan, it's called the Boilermaker. And all it is, they have a whole list of different combinations of beer and shots. So the place on the Upper East Side, same thing. Upper East Side is up and coming. Different combinations of beer and shots. So basically, I don't know. My variations, I have a sip of the spirit first, and then I chase it down with the beer, right? So let's see if this works together. Cheers. Cheers, everybody.
Trying to get us directly.
Yeah.
You know I am. I get on a plane in about 3 hours, so I'm just going to leave you all decimated. Then you get my husband's here, so you can just, take it out on him. That was actually pretty nice. That works really, really well. So that was one of those combinations of a nice light wheat beer with the tequila. So, think of this and then, okay, so now I have my 2 ingredients. I have, my base, or maybe my base and my modifier. What else am I going to add to make a cocktail? All right? I'm going to take a shot of my tequila. So basically the Boilermaker, nobody really knows. I was looking it up, like where it comes from. But basically the name, according to the Oxford Dictionary, was the name of workers who used to, they said fix boilers. They were craftsmen who worked on steam locomotives. And that's where the word Boilermaker comes from. But the drink itself, supposedly the name was before that. But nobody knows exactly where it came from. So this is the only thing somebody could come up with that I found. Then again, it was on Wikipedia, so it's probably not true. So I have to sit down with Dave Wondrich and get him to give me the full detailed story of where the Boilermaker comes from. But it's just an easy thing, and this is a great addition. If you have a good craft beer list, this is a great, and you want to sell spirits too, have a Boilermaker menu. Have 4 or 5 on your menu. It's a great combination, easy way to you guys to make money and up your check. All right? So beer styles, right? There's so many beer styles. There's over 62 different beer styles in the world. And the actual styling of beer and actually creating beer styles is actually quite new. It didn't actually start happening until 1970s and 1980s. Before that, obviously, there was millions of styles of beer, but nobody ever took the time to write it down. Like that this is an ale, and this is a lager, and this is a wheat beer. Like it was just like, this is our beer, and we make it this way. But it wasn't until the 1970s, 1980s when people started making beer at home. There were home brewers, right? And then people started writing about beer. And then basically people started getting excited about beer. And then this whole beer movement happened. And the craft beer market exploded. And it's mostly here in America. When I travel, there's not a lot of craft beers in other countries. It's up and coming, but not like there is here. There is a new brewery opening up every day. Literally, it's like, I think it was like 1.2 breweries open up every day, and there are room, if you guys are looking for a business, there's the room for 30,000 breweries in the United States, and there are lots of states that there is only 1 brewery in the entire state.
So it used to be only McSorley's, darker one.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. That's all you got. You got this, you got the dark one or the light one, and just call it a day. I don't know what it's called, just fucking drink it. That's what McSorley's.
It's called clean water.
Yeah, exactly. But and here's your burger, and just shut up and go sit over there. But basically, every style has very specific ingredients. They use a specific yeast. They use a specific, grain. Their hops are different.
And I would say yeast is very, very important. And I think yeast is a defining factor for craft beers. And because when you choose your yeast, you're choosing what flavors go into your beers. We can talk a little bit more about that with the difference between an ale and a lager.
Yes, we definitely will. And it's the same with spirits, right? You change, one tequila can be made in the exact same distillery as the other tequila, but they change what yeast is being used. Beers, again, it will make a completely different flavor profile. So the same thing is true with beer. And also the hops, which hops they're using. So you change one of these elements, and suddenly that beer is no longer a lager, and it's an ale. Like you're making all the exact same, or it's a wheat beer, whatever it is, you change one thing in and out and you have a totally different type of beer. So we're just gonna talk about a few of the styles, the ones we're using in these cocktails, some of the ones that I've discovered that I really like working with. Because as I was talking about the cocktail components, beer can act in any way. Like it can be the modifier, it can be the base, it could be the flavoring agent. So it's up to you to choose which way you're going to use the beer. But it can act, it's one of those ingredients that's very rare that you can use in all 3 parts of the cocktail in a different way. Wheat beer, which is the beer we're drinking now, which is pretty nice.
Oh, I shot mine. You said we were doing Boilermaker.
We'll bring you more. Touche. But wheat beer is kind of a new style of beer. It's not new, it's been around, but it wasn't one that people talked about. Basically, there are 2 different types. There's a Belgium and a Bavarian. The Belgians, they started making it, the 1400s, monks were working with wheat beer. And their beers kept coming out, they were really sour. So they started flavoring them very traditionally with orange peel and coriander. And that is the style today. All Belgian wheat beers will have orange peel and coriander. Where Bavarian beers are actually fermented with ale yeast. So they taste a little bit different. They're a little more fruity. They're a little bit more spicy. And those are the ones that almost disappeared. Because basically, Germany put these purity laws out. Sounds very German, doesn't it?
Right.
Yeah. And
Bavaria.
And Bavaria. And they basically unified. And basically, the purity laws said you can only make beer with water, hops, and barley. That was it. That was the only, and that law stayed in place until 1987. So Bavaria was making their own, they're making a wheat-style beer. Now, lucky for them, this beer was made by the Whitlow beer, I can't say it, it's like Whitlow family. They were the royal family of Bavaria, and they were the only ones that got the exception. They were also the only ones that got to drink this beer. It was only stayed within the royal family. So that beer stayed in place, and they've been drinking it ever since. And so you'll see it out there, Hefeweizens, and you'll see like German wheat beer. So they definitely have different styles. So obviously, you know, this wheat beer is a very soft, very traditional Belgian beer. So if you find a Hefeweizen, which is a German wheat beer, it's going to be a little bit different. It's going to be with ale yeast, it's going to be fruitier and spicier. It's going to react differently to the spirits. So making sure you know which wheat beer you're working with. So the one we have here is Hoegaarden. So as I said, Hoegaarden is from Belgium. It was a beer that was originally made by monks. And in 1960, they kind of brought it back because wheat beer had kind of died out. Nobody was drinking it. And this gentleman, Pierre Sales, of the town Hoegaarden, actually brought it back to life. He opened up his brewery and he started putting and named the beer Hoegaarden. And then eventually they got bought out by InBev, which is the company I work for, and now you see it all around the world. So the drink you have in front of you is a Radler. So as I said, yeah, or shandy, whatever, or if you're in France, it's panache. So we did not use lemon lime soda. Instead of using 7-Up, because I don't really drink soda, I use fresh lemon juice and simple syrup. They muddled their strawberries, and then just so this is an example of using beer as your base. There's no other ingredients in here. Hopefully it's good, guys.
Yeah, down at Fool's Gold, we have a drink called the Coney Island, and we use whatever porter we have on tap and add liquid smoked maple syrup and just maybe a touch of lemon, depending on the acidity of the porters, because they all change.
Yep, over time. So this is imagine this drink in a big tall glass over ice. I mean, this is a very sessionable drink. You can have this all day.
Screams Florida.
It's what?
Screams Florida.
Yeah, it screams Florida. It really does. This will be an easy drink for your customers to enjoy on the menu. It's a great way of selling beer. And it's a simple cocktail. I know we all hate muddling, but strawberries aren't that hard. It's not like muddling limes and mint. It's different than the mojito, isn't it? But really an easy drink. And the one thing I did discover with this drink was most of the time people think about beer and about carbonation and that you shouldn't shake it. And it is true, you should not really shake up beer, but I actually found that this cocktail actually did better. I tried it different ways, like I shook it, which didn't work very well for me, just to see what would happen. And then I tried just kind of like topping it off with the beer, and that was okay, but all the ingredients weren't really mixed together. So what I did was actually throw it. I throw it back and forth, and when you did that and all the ingredients mixed together, it actually tasted much better. I found the strawberries really infused with the beer in a better combination, and then I fine strained it over ice, and it still had that nice frothy head. And by throwing it actually got more froth and more mouthfeel to it. So different techniques need to be applied when making different style cocktails.
It's nice to have some beer cocktails on your menu just for the sake of your shoulders.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of less, not as much shaking, right? There's not as much to do, so it is much easier on the wear and tear. And I think actually if Duchamp was here, I know he taught a whole seminar this morning about how to stay in the game for longer, so beer cocktails should have been in there. How to stay a little bit longer. All right, so ale versus lager. Do you want to talk a little bit about them?
Well, yeah. Typically, we talk about the difference between an ale and a lager is how the yeast settles in the actual container there as the wort is fermenting. The wort being the word that we use to describe the mash of all the grains and such and the yeast. And typically, ales, we call them top fermenters, where the yeast settles up top, and then lagers, we say lie low, where the yeast go to the bottom of the container, which is the name of which is escaping my mind.
Yes,
How? Yeah. Oh, not.
No.
Not
The
the
container
deck
itself has
the
a name, and
actual
it's
deck.
escaping my mind as well. But it doesn't matter. Not at this point, anyway.
But additionally, what's most important, again, and I said it a little bit earlier, is the type of yeast used. And lager yeast produces a lot less esters than ale yeast. Ale yeast specifically is a higher ester producing type of yeast. And there are obviously different strains that brewers choose for all of these flavoring purposes. The yeast, the temperature of the yeast is active in ales from like 62 degrees to 67 degrees, and then with lagers, the yeast is activated at like 50, so there's a temperature differentiation there, but truly it's the esters that really mark the difference between an ale and a lager, and that fruity characteristic from those esters.
Yeah, and lagers is the beer that most of us are familiar with. It's the highest selling beer, in a style of beer in America. Our Budweisers and our Coors, things of that nature. These are all, lagers, easy to drink. Because they do bottom fermentation, it makes it a much crisper, lighter style of beer. Well, ale tends to be, actually its flavors, ale tends to be more robust tasting. They tend to be more fruity and aromatic. They tend to have a little more bitterness to them. They can be more complex, and they're enjoyed a little bit warmer. The English, they drink a lot of ale. Ale's been around, that was the first beer, right? If you were in the Middle Ages, whether you were 5 or 55, you drank ale every day, because ale, what was it? They started discovering that, it was like boiling, they had to boil it. So it was cleaner and easier to drink and better for you than the water itself, which was not fresh. And it also had nutrition to it. So it wasn't until the 19th century where they actually discovered this other style of yeast, and they learned how to make a lager. And they had a bottom with the bottom fermentation. So then they were able to make this crisper, easier drinking beer. But each one of them is going to have its own flavor characteristics. But we're going to be tasting right now. And guys, if you're the next drink, yeah, we're ready. Sorry, I should have gave you a fire warning. So this brings me to farmhouse ales, because farmhouse ales, there's many different types of ales. But one of the ones that I work with are farmhouse style ales. And farmhouse ales literally is what it means. They were made by the farmers. They were made with whatever ingredients were around, right? So if they had wheat, they made it with wheat. If they had corn, whatever they could find, they were making their beer. It was something like after a long day at the farm, they wanted something to kind of comfort themselves. But a lot of times they were really sour, so they would flavor them with fruit, whatever fruit that they had. Blueberries, blackberries, strawberries, and the yeast that they were using was wild yeast, right? We all love wild yeast. When we're talking about tequila, right? Some of our favorite brands like El Tesoro, we love, wild yeast. You never know what you're gonna get. So obviously they're very rudimentary. They all taste differently. They're very, very unique. But now people are learning, and you'll see this a lot with saisons. These saison beers are very popular. That's a style of a farmhouse ale. And now people are learning to replicate this process, but they're obviously not doing wild yeast, but they're making these. The beer you're going to taste now, the Jillian, is in this next cocktail, is being made in Chicago. So obviously they do open fermentation, but in a much more controlled way. The other thing about farmhouse ales, they actually tend to be much more higher in alcohol. They'll go anywhere from 7.5% to, I've seen the one Jillian is 9.5% alcohol. So they definitely are higher in alcohol. So you drink these like a wine.
Yes, exactly.
And these are one of those beers that you're talking about that would warm up, that you would actually allow it. You would serve it like in a nice long bottle. You would serve it, in a wine glass to consume it. You would let it warm up for 25. Do you have any of these on your?
Oh yeah, we have a rotating list that changes every day. So we have farmhouse ales, and we have different glassware for all of our different taps, and we have stemware for many of the farmhouse ales or the barley wines or the meads and such. And it kind of throws people off a little bit. They're a little bit and ciders too. We always put the ciders in the stem glass. They're like, oh, I thought I got a beer.
Yeah.
You did. It's delicious.
And it's delicious. No, and different styles, so it really matters. But the reason I chose to use this one, now this is actually a treat for us in a way that these are rare beer. Like the Jillian is what we call one of our vintage ales. And it's on limited edition. Like I had to have it shipped here from Miami because it doesn't exist here in Tampa. It is usually released in, I believe, the summer season for this, because we have what's called the 5 Sour Sisters. And this one comes out, I believe, in October, right? So they release new beer every 2 months. It is barrel aged. So it is a saison beer that is barrel aged with strawberries and white pepper. It's created so it's actually brewed with strawberries and white pepper, and then is then put in for a second fermentation in red wine barrels. They actually add in honey and pepper and 50 pounds of strawberries. So this is then it's actually fermented with champagne yeast. So it's a much more complex beer. This is also a beer, like you can take that beer and it's bottle aging, meaning it's there's still yeast in the bottle. It's bottle conditioned. So it's still, you can actually, like if you sat that beer and you want to store beer upright, you don't want to actually touching the cork, not like wine, you lay it on the side. You can let it sit for another year and it'll taste differently, better. It actually will age. You can age that beer up to 5 years. So, but it also works really well with cocktails. So imagine if you had these styles of beers in your house and you had a collection of sours and every 2 months you change out your cocktail in the menu and got people excited, like our new vintage beer is here, here's a new, you can drink it neat or in a cocktail. And for the cocktail you guys are gonna get, it's a Farmhouse Collins. So this beer is a sour. I was actually able to replace lemon juice with the sour beer because it has so much acidity to it, there was no lemon juice needed. So the preparation of this cocktail is basically, I did not throw this cocktail. I shook the Tanqueray and the simple syrup together, chilled that down, strained that into a highball, and then poured. And I actually do love using the trick. I actually, to not get too much foam, Naren Young showed me this trick a long time ago, just as a cool bar trick where you put your bar spoon and then you pour the soda down the bar spoon. It works really well with beer. Because instead of, sometimes when you're pouring a beer down, sometimes you don't pour it just right, you're gonna get too much froth, it's gonna overwhelm. By pouring it down your bar spoon and letting it kind of like drown down there, it actually just slowly builds in the glass and it gets that perfect head. So this is just a way, so this is the different way of using beer as a flavoring agent, as your acidity, as a sour agent. So as I said, there are different ways you can use the beer in a cocktail. So IPAs, who drinks IPAs?
Okay, wait.
Go ahead.
Of course, but can we go back to the farmhouse ale for a while?
Yeah.
Would a lambic be considered a farmhouse ale because of the way that it's wild yeast fermented?
Yeah, I would think so. I'm not sure. This is the question. Do you know?
I actually don't know, but
Lanella, I'm sorry.
I'm actually thinking like probably not.
Well, I mean, I know it doesn't like fit into that style, but technically the lambics, so far as I remember from my beer history, were brewed on farms.
Yep.
It's open fermentation with wild yeast. So
No, it would be. I would believe.
Farmhouse ale specifically that process, or is it?
Yes. So I would believe you are technically correct. It would be more like a saison, farmhouse ale. They're all kind of, and anything made with fruit and wild fermentation is basically a farmhouse ale. So yeah.
But do the Olympics have grain in them?
But it's an old beer deal. So
Yeah.
they're all going to have malted they're all going to
That's
have
all
malted
malted.
barley, but it's about the fruit. And in addition of the fruit, that's what makes it, that's what that's what makes that style unique. It's about putting the addition of the fruit into the actual aging process, the fermentation.
With the yeast and the chili, so if you age it for a full 5 years, is your alcohol percentage by volume going to go up?
That's a good question. I would think, yeah, because it's constantly eating the
Right.
sugar, so it's going to increase the alcohol.
Okay.
Yeah. I know, I haven't been there to try it out yet, but Gotham Grill has an entire cellar of barrel-aged beer. That's all it, yeah, so, yeah. It's not Gotham, it's the... Gramercy Tavern.
Now, depending on the type of beer, do they keep the barrels at different temperatures or in different parts,
Well, temperature is really important. You
Yeah.
always have to maintain your temperatures and make sure that beer can spoil very quickly. So, like maintenance of your temperatures is absolutely really
Yeah, so
imperative.
somewhere between 55,
Yes.
50 and 55, what we talked about, that's the perfect condition for aging their beer. And they just kind of let it sit. It's in the bottles. It's just kind of doing its thing. And they have an entire vintage program on their menu, like different beers from different times, which is pretty cool.
40, then you kill your yeast, right?
Right. The yeasts are active at around 50 degrees and or like 64 to 65 degrees. So, yeah.
Yeah, and eventually, obviously, the yeast are going to die because they're going to eat up all the sugar, and then it's going to be done.
Starve.
They're going to starve, exactly. They're going to starve for that. Ooh, those look pretty.
Not as pretty as you.
No. I like you.
Probably
Um,
Happy 75 flowers, that's all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Like, for lunch. Is student by those styles the one? In order to get to the.
And please forgive me for not knowing all my beer knowledge just yet. It's still 4 months in. I'm still learning. There's so much to learn, but it's exciting. We're going to be bringing a lot of stuff.
Start to next year.
Shame, I know. 15 years in the liquor industry, and yeah. So, but this is something. That's one of the reasons I love my new job, is because I'm getting to learn something new, and I'm getting to bring all this new knowledge to the spirit industry, which is kind of a lot of fun because everybody's going to learn together. How's this taste? You taste it good?
It's delightful.
So the one thing about the Jillian is that you might taste, if you give it a little, is that you'll taste the strawberries. Can you taste that, like the aftertaste, like the strawberry? But there's no citrus in there. That's just the beer. So it's just beer, simple syrup, and gin.
Sours can be really sour.
But if you stir this drink, I actually found it like better because then you get the sugar, and a little bit more sugar. Because they poured this in the top, so you're getting all the beer in the top. So if you just taste it now, if you stir it up, you'll actually get the beer. And that little bit of sugar is actually going to accentuate the strawberry flavor in the beer itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As soon as you said that, I was like,
Yeah, as soon as you said that, because if you just drank it right from the top in the beginning, all you got was the sour notes of the beer. But once you stirred it all together, then it was like, whoa.
yeah.
I love sour cider. It's really, really good.
This is my favorite new drink.
Sour cider.
I was like,
Yeah,
it's just, it's
so good.
light, it's refreshing. Obviously very boozy. This is one you have to be careful about because you're adding booze to booze. So this is, 42.5 right for the gin, and then another, and then 9.5 for the beer. So this is a lot of alcohol in one drink. Good times.
Cheers to that.
And when you want to bring out the next drink, guys, we're on the But yeah, so it's a great example of how you can use sours. Obviously, it would not be a cheap drink. Good gin and good beer, but I think once you get people onto it, they're going to really love it. And again, tall and refreshing. You put that in a big tall glass, big Collins glass, it would be really good. So IPAs. So IPAs, a lot of people used to think IPAs, some people hate IPAs. My husband being one of them, really hates IPAs. I wasn't into, like, when I first started learning, about beer and drinking beer, it wasn't my first choice. Like, I definitely went for a wheat beer or a lager. I'm learning to really acquire the taste for IPAs. I actually like Goose Island IPA. It's a really nice, not too overly hopped. My husband will disagree because he thinks all IPAs are too hopped. But they can be different. There's Imperial IPAs, where it's like super hoppy and like
Double IPAs, triple IPAs.
Yeah.
Typically, doubles and triples tend to be a little more sweeter, a little less hoppy.
Yeah.
Triples usually are the sweetest, or if we are allowed to use that term, and kind of loosely less,
Yeah.
the least bitter of the
of the thing. So definitely finding your style. They're not all the same. That's why it's really important. A lot of people say, "I'll just have an IPA." They are different. So order by brand. It's kind of like just asking. None of us would ever go into a bar and ask for a gin and tonic. You would ask for your specific gin. You probably now ask for your very specific tonic. Same thing goes for your beers. You actually, I just want to ask for, know your beers, know your lagers, know your IPAs. And they do bring a ton of flavor. And it was believed for a while, I was reading, Adam Sager. He actually believed for a long time you actually couldn't mix an IPA. Like it was him, they gave a seminar at Tales a couple years back, him and Doug Frost and Franconi out of Vegas. They were like, no IPAs. And then Christian Singland came in, and I'm sure a lot of people didn't, and he's like, no, you can totally mix with an IPA. Like, this works really, really well. And it works really well. I actually found, and one of Christian's drinks that we're going to have now, this is a simplified version of it, is an Aperol Spritz, but made with IPA beer. So it's taking a bitter and a bitter, kind of combining the two together. So
I have a guy at the Jeffrey, his name is Travis, and he has Hellfire bitters added into his IPA. And since it's rotating taps every single day, depending on if it's single cut or other half or Ninkasi, like we put a different amount of the Hellfire bitters in it. It's
So
really
you just
fun.
like straight IPA
Straight IPA with Hellfire bitters.
with Hellfire
Delicious.
bitters. Is it really? Wow.
Yeah.
So that's
That's good. So these are very nice and very light. Could you do anything more with like the old colonial kind of or mariner cocktails, the Bradley Skulls, porter and rum, and
I do a lot of dark and stormy variations. I love ginger, and I love using like porter, and I think porters and stouts and rum, aged rum, especially just like go really well together.
Yeah, bourbons and whiskeys go really well with stouts and so on. I just figured it was Florida, light and easy, and drinking was probably going to be the combination. And also, I really hate stouts. So sorry, you're suffering from my own distaste of stouts. I've been trying, we're drinking lots of different ones, and I'm just like, meh. And we have one like Bourbon County just came out, the Bourbon County stout, and it's like a big deal, and like Black Friday, and I'm like, they gave me one as a present, and I was like, awesome, I'm gonna give this to someone else. But it's a big deal, you know, it's like this big process. So yes, but there is amazing combinations of stout that I found online. There's a lot of them. I haven't started playing with them yet. I will, because I should, and it's a professional thing to do, and I just won't drink them myself. But yeah, so definitely, you know, different, so like the hops, you could see there was a couple of different types of hops being used. Like they use 1, 2, 3, 4 different types of hops to get their flavor. And where you add hops into the process of when you're brewing a beer matters. So if you put them in right in the beginning, that's for the bitterness. If you put them into the middle, that's for the flavoring agent, because that's going to be brewed. That's only like 30 minutes before the brew process is over. They add the hops in. And then the last 10 minutes, I'll add in more hops for the aroma. So depending on how many hops you want and where you put them in the process is going to change the bitterness of the beer. And what kind of hops is going to change. There's always, you know, a new hop. I'm learning a lot about the beer people and the beer geeks. They're very different animals than we are. It's a very different world. They get very excited about different things like the style of hops, like where the hops came from. And they also like to wear food around their neck. It's a whole thing. So it's still something I'm getting over. After going to my first Great American Beer Festival, and I'm like, there are people wearing pretzels around their neck. If they said it's just a convenient way so they could eat and drink at the same time. I was like, I don't know, there's a plate for that, and maybe I just sit down and I have food. I don't know. It's a thing. So this is the Aperol Spritzer, probably becoming one of the hottest drinks, right? The easiest drink, the Campari Spritzer, everybody drank in Italy, and then Aperol came along to America. And everybody's now drinking Aperol all the time. I love both. I love Campari and I love Aperol. But I always found that my consumer, like when I was making cocktail menus, like if I gave them Aperol in the cocktail, they'd be like, ooh, that's too bitter. Most of them, they're not bartenders. They don't drink like us. And most consumers want something a little softer, a little sweeter. So that's why I think Aperol, you know, really kind of made its day. I am doing a little study though to find out if IPAs being popular, because IPAs are really popular in America. Like you go to other countries, their IPAs there, maybe Germany, they're starting to catch on, but they're not as popular as they are here. Like Latin America could give rat's ass about IPAs. Like they do not drink them because they like fruity things, right? So I'm trying to see if there's a correlation between the markets where Campari and Aperol are doing really well and the sales of IPAs. Because to see if there's a correlation between the two. If like the consumers are drinking that, then they're ready for the IPA. Or is it where IPAs are doing well, will Campari and Aperol follow? So this is basically just an Aperol Spritz, but with beer. So this is using an IPA, so it's mixing two bitter things, right? But Aperol, and Goose IPA is actually a sweeter IPA, an Aperol. And I tried it with Campari too, it tasted really nice, but then I tried it with Aperol and I liked it better. How is it? It's just really light and refreshing, easy to drink. Not too hard to make. I mean, this is a really fast, easy drink to have on your menu.
God, that's delicious.
Isn't that good?
I would imagine that Campari would be a little bit too aggressive.
It can be.
And there's already a fair amount of bitterness from those hops, so it's...
Yeah, no, and I tried it, and I liked it with the Campari, and I was like, all right, to be fair, let me try it with Aperol, and I was like, damn. So I was really trying to try it with the Campari, I was like, damn, it tastes better with the Aperol. And I think it's because the drink needed a little sugar to kind of boost those fruit notes in the cocktail itself. So the last part of this is about artisanal usage for beer. So obviously you can use beer for food. Does anybody ever cook with beer? Does anybody cook? Okay, so few cook. Okay, I don't cook, so. I tried really hard, but not very good at it. And then you can obviously, I discovered then you can make beer syrup, right? So instead of simple syrup, which is sugar and water, you replace the water with the beer.
Wow.
Yeah.
And beer syrup is
You're not
great.
you're
It
not
lasts
producing it?
a really long
No,
time.
well you can. So if you're using, I saw
Yeah.
another recipe, like
It
so
would
very
have a
simple
good
ones
shot.
is just beer and water, beer and sugar. But then I did see a recipe for stout, and if you're using like a stout or a porter, they reduce it. They cook it to reduction to almost 1/3 of the beer itself. Let it cool, and then add the sugar. So for this one though, it's just beer, like a simple one, just beer and sugar.
What kind of beer?
Equal parts.
Usually?
Yeah,
What kind of beer?
I would do better. I think it's like any wheat, lager, anything, like depending how flavorful, how much hops. An IPA, like you could use an IPA.
Yeah, it
one.
depends on what you're,
Yeah,
what
what
you're
flavor you
looking
wanna
for.
get.
So I've been doing beer cocktails for a number of years, and one of the things that bars complain about all the time is that when you only use 2 ounces of a bottle, then the bottle goes flat and it's not good anymore. I'm like, this is how we're gonna solve that. We're gonna make beer syrup, and it will
Oh.
last a really long time. Just keep it in the cooler when you're not in service. It clearly is gonna be flat because it's syrup, so you don't have to worry about it going flat on the bar. But it's
Yep.
not gonna turn temperatures and sour or become, it's just like what you would do instead of muddling strawberries if you have a high fat taste, but you would rather you could just make a syrup out of it.
Yep.
Add some syrup. I mean, Deshaun taught me that years ago. I feel it. It's your seminar as well, trying to talk like a madman. Years ago. Something like that. But yeah, these are like simple things you can do to make your bar more efficient and
The uses
mindful
for
of
flat
cost of
beer,
goods
beer
and
syrup.
not waste product. I mean, I don't know any bar that really that ends up with extra champagne at the end of the night, but if you did, maybe you should.
Oh no, we don't have
I know a lot of
to.
bars.
Or some people actually use, or sometimes the extra beer, like I've heard people say, like that's our compliment, like we'll just send out a complimentary, like small glass of beer. Like that's like, just because it's gonna go off, so it's like a nice addition, like instead of going off, let's just put a short beer and send it out as a nice addition. You can also use one of the bars, the Porch Light, which is a Danny Meyer's standoff, one of their single, like it's a standalone restaurant. Michael Shane makes it's called the IPA, Better IPA, and it's an IPA cocktail, but then he makes an IPA foam. So he actually puts the beer in a charger, just shakes it up, double charges it, and uses it as a foam. And it's really nice. So it's like the foam on top of it. So it's like way of adding bitterness. He says he just pours in and he adds in a gelatin. So he pours it in, he adds in a gelatin, and then he just shakes up the charger, double charges it, and puts it on the top of his drink. So it's a way of adding IPA because what some people I've been talking to have said, if it has IPA in it, people drink it. Like no matter what it is, whether it's an IPA syrup, it's an IPA foam, whatever it is, if it says IPA, I'm way over. It says they will drink it. So it's a selling point. It's kind of like the way Saint Germain was, or probably still is, right? I call it cougar juice.
That's amazing.
Because it's true. If you're over a certain age and you see it's like Pinot Grigio, some Saint Germain, you're like, I'm in. Give me a bucket. I'm done. Call it a day. That's IPA is the millennial cougar juice. So there you go. Just stick it in there and call it a day. So those are some of the artisanal uses. And this guy, the beer syrup, actually you can buy it, but it's for like maple syrup. Some bartender created it. He actually kickstarted his whole project, and he was going to sell it because he was making beer syrup, and he was going to make it to sell to bartenders. And so he said, "You're an idiot. Don't sell it to bartenders and the consumers. They're going to buy it more." So he opened up, and it's a whole line of beer syrups with different flavors of like pecan syrup, walnut beer syrup, and now he sells it in stores. So I'm sure there's a lot of dads if they're getting their Father's Day and Christmas and all this stuff. It was very smart. So there's a whole line of beer syrups. So that is the end of the beer cocktail seminar. So thank you so much. I'm very grateful for being home. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Happy to help.
Thank you. I can't wait to come to Jeffries. And as I learn more, there'll be more coming. The next seminar will be more intense as I start to learn more about beer and all that stuff. So thank you very much for being the first people I've ever spoken to about beer and beer. appreciate
Part two
it.
next year.
Yeah, exactly. Part 2 next year. Or you never know. Drink up, everybody. I'm gonna drink this. And I hope you guys have a good time with this.
Carlos says that if you make tomato sauce for yourself at home, you should add some red ale to it. He says it pops it and makes the flavor.
Yes.
Really?
At the middle of the process, you add the beer.
So we're
Which
going
kind of
to
beer?
When the
For
tomato
good.
sauce absorbs
Yeah.
the flavor of the beer, the red ale, and it's delicious.
Really? Which beer? What kind of beer?
Red ale.
Red ale.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
That's the one that I use so far, red ale, or sometimes I use a fruity beer, but I like better with the red ale. I think that pairs more with the tomato, and the only thing that I use is just garlic, onions, tomato, and some herbs. That's
Wow.
it. And it tastes delicious. Just-
come to your house.
I'm gonna get that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna get that recipe to my brother. The chances of me making tomato sauce is nil. But my brother-in-law is awesome and he used to cook in that, so we're gonna give that to him.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Anybody else? Does anybody have beer cocktails on their menu now? Yeah. What do you
Yeah,
have?
every time we've got 4 of them. One is like a play on a dark and stormy. It's with Guinness, habanero ginger syrup, lime juice, and rum.
Ooh.
There's one that's kind of like a screwdriver on vinegar. It's like Galeana, Grand Marnier, and actually use
I think I saw that one with the habanero online. Actually, I was reading that one. It's a good recipe. I was like,
yeah,
that
I
looks
mean,
really
they
yummy.
actually sell it really, really well. Then there's one with gin, grapefruit, IPA, and then one with that snap liqueur,
Mhm.
bullet bourbon, maple syrup, and cider.
Wow, you guys have a lot.
Yeah.
That's a pretty extensive menu. No, it's something I'm seeing growing. I mean, obviously, I didn't start paying attention to it until I got into this side of the business, and then I started watching menus. But I'm definitely seeing a trend that people at least have one on their menu, and then I see people with more. Like Philip was just telling me, like a place near us, like which is just like the the local hangout bar. But it's a really nice place. But they now have like 4 cocktails.
They actually have a shandy
A
list.
shandy list
Yeah.
on their menu. So it definitely is growing. It definitely is a growing thing. And as I said, the IPA is the new cougar juice of the millennials. So having one of those on your menu will definitely help it sell, whether it's in syrup form or foam form or actually in the cocktail. And that drink, I think if you took that drink, the IPA drink, and added like a half a shot of Saint Germain, which you have everybody drinking it then. There's a certain ingredients to it. But I do have a question, since you guys are still sitting here, research-wise, I'll use it. So, are you guys interested in getting more beer knowledge, like just beer knowledge?
We just,
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
just finished a months-long program in our chapter trying to get people to take the
Cicerones?
yeah, the Cicerone test.
Wow. It's a lot of
It was
information.
good.
It's a lot of
Like,
information.
it
I'm
ain't hard
supposed to-
people show up,
I'm
but
supposed to
we-
take
We
it.
just broke it down so that if you missed, if it was the first one in the middle of it that you came into, you wouldn't be lost.
Right.
And I mean, I thought it was pretty successful. People were really happy with it.
So did you guys go through the modules on the line? Because you go online. Because I just did my beer server
But
certified.
we let that guide what we did.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, it's pretty dope. I don't know. I think it's important.
I think
obviously it's something which we all do more now when we drink some more craft beer. And you don't want to just be one-dimensional as a bartender.
Yeah, one of the proposals I pitched for at Tails, you would think sleeping with the director of education had any influence, but it really has none. Because he has no say in which seminars actually get chosen. Because on my team is there's only 10 Master Cicerones in the world, and one of them is on my team. Her name is Morello Amato, which is amazing. She has a book called Beerology, which is really good. If you want to learn it, like it just kind of gives you like a very good, quick introduction to beer and all the different styles. And one of the things we proposed is about one, she's going to propose an all-day seminar. So it's the starting place to get your beer certification. And then another one was about beer programs. Because a lot of the bars that I've been visiting, like our cocktail bars, like the beer list is like a thin little piece of paper in the back of the, like, they have an amazing list, and it's like one tiny little page. It's like
descriptions, you have
Yeah.
descriptions for your cocktail.
Right, exactly. So the seminar is all about beer program, how to write make a beer program that complements your cocktail program. and then like how to write your beer list, like, you know, what it should look like. You know, if you're doing all this work for this, why shouldn't you have equal part for this? And then another beer cocktails, but more advanced, the next stage. So good to know, because that's like America sadly is not my zone, but I'm working with that because I'm so passionate about this, because you guys are my people. So I wanted to make sure that so it's good to know. I'm glad to know I'm not alone in thinking that. I was like, I think cocktail people want to learn about beer. Mostly because, are you just bored of cocktails?
I think it just, for a lot of people, it seems like a new frontier. So
Yeah.
it's like, we've all read all of the other cocktail
Yeah,
books.
either that or they just, like, I know for me, I just put it on.
Yeah, fair enough.
It was actually just yesterday, we just recently changed our menu to be almost all craft beers. And so next to each beer, it says how many miles away from our restaurant it's brewed. And so I had a guy asking me a lot of beer questions yesterday, but we haven't really had the training yet. So I talked to one of my other bartenders, and we decided that every week we're each gonna do our own research on, you know, X amount of things and meet together every week to go over it. So we're just now finally starting to go over all the beer stuff. But we've had a bunch of different beer cocktails on the menu. Like we made Guinness syrups and topped drinks off with like Kronenberg.
So the beer, but this is the thing. One article I read was like, how do you get the beer nerd, like, do the beer nerds, do people who drink cocktails want beer cocktails, and do beer nerds want cocktails? Like,
I think not.
I don't think beer nerds want
Yeah.
cocktails.
Beer nerds don't want
beer
cocktails.
nerds do not drink cocktails.
It was really hard working with the beer side people. Like,
Yeah.
it was by far the most, like, to get all the seminars and everything put together, the most difficult, like, just disinterested, not kind of wanting to bridge that gap, which is kind of a bummer because we should be all just.
Yeah, I think in the cocktail world we're more
Cocktail
advanced.
bartenders, but-
More advanced meaning like we've been doing it a lot longer, and like the beer nerds, like they have no.
But they want to be like, it's just us, you know, like
Yeah.
have like their own guild in the state. If no one, if you don't do it, it even hurt. We're like, we're all Bart. How do we not even?
Yeah, they don't like to communicate. They're very special
It's
nerds.
kind of a bummer, but maybe that. I mean, maybe we just have to do better.
It was
job
fun.
reaching out.
I mean, with Michigan having Grand Rapids and Detroit, a lot of different breweries.
Yeah, our beer styles.
We have a stupid amount of breweries. It's way more breweries than we have people in, like the city I live in. But it's those people that drink those beers and they come and like they look for them. They're also into cocktails. For us anyway, like, we don't really do beer cocktails at my bar per se. We can if you ask for it, but they just weren't as popular.
That probably
We
is
stopped
just
it, but like they're like, oh, did you hear about this beer coming out? Like they're those people in line waiting for those weird beers, or like we'll talk to you about all of it, but at the same time they're just as into like how
But
cocktails are too.
we have some beer bars that are like the meccas in our town, and that's where that stuff happens. But like all the other bars or the cocktails, there seems to be like large discount. I don't know. Again, it's probably our market. So.
It might be, because I know with how small, or not small, maybe small, but how new ours is, our beer people are heavily involved in our guild in general and are very well versed in cocktails along with
Really?
beer.
What state are you in?
Oklahoma.
Wow.
Yeah, and so like to the point that they'll do whatever to sponsor and get their name out there and be a part of. And I think it's partially because we're on the edge of like blowing up, yes, and everyone wants to be a part of that in whatever way they can.
Interesting.
They're going to do that. So
But yeah, I think it's market for market.
What's your experience on the nationals?
I'm I'm getting to know the beer consumer, and they are definitely different. They remind me somehow of like some of the ones I've met that are really like hardcore. They remind me like when mixology first struck off, and being an asshole was accepted, right? Like somebody came to your bar and ordered cosmopolitan, you tell them to go fuck themselves, and that was totally like you're like, yeah, you totally should because we're awesome, like, and we know more shit than everybody else does, so yeah, we can be an asshole. There's still, some people are still there, like they're like, look, we're beer, and beer is precious, and it's our world, and that's what we're living in. And no, as you said, they're like, but I think it varies. They don't drink a lot of, most of them I've met, like when I drink a cocktail, like I'll order, it's still like, like you're drinking a cocktail? I'm like, there's only so much beer I can drink, man. You know, I have my, so yeah. I went to the Great American Beer Fest, and yeah, I mean, it was such a different, have you ever been?
No,
It's like an experience in itself. I mean, there's like 500 breweries there, it's all stuff, and, you know, and as I said, people wearing food around their neck, and like that's standard. Everything else is kind of normal. It's like sneakers, the cargo short pants, and a t-shirt, and a shirt. That's your outfit. Like everybody wears that outfit. Except for then there's people who wear costumes.
The cargo shorts.
The cargo shorts. It's cargo shorts. So there's definitely a very distinct way, and like getting pride of like marking your stuff off. But I don't know, like yeah, and I was like, oh, let's have a whiskey and a beer, and they're like, you want to do what? And I'm like,
I can't speak for Dallas. I mean, I can speak for Dallas, not Austin or San Antonio or Houston, but we've got this huge like we're doing Boilermakers like crazy right now. And also, I don't mean to be this way, but 3 of our most known restaurateur barmen, I mean, like, they are not drinking cocktails right now. I walked up to a buddy the other day, I won't say his name, and I'm like, and he orders he ordered 8 car bombs. And I was like, 8 car bombs? And out of his mouth, and you know, again, I know where I'm at. And he's like, the cocktail is dead. And I'm like, whoa. What did that come from? And then I started realizing, holy shit, like, we're drinking, like, on, like, all the new bars that are opening are coming out with like Boilermaker menus. Like Boilermakers are like Dallas City.
Yeah, no, Boilermakers are definitely happening.
Shop the beer.
It's a new pickleback. Yeah, it kind of is that, but now beer is involved. There's 2 beverages, and
but to see the elite guy like to order 8 car bombs and to say
the cocktails are dead.
Dead. I'm like, whoa, it sounds like somebody else I know who's saying that.
So we had a bad day.
Sounds like somebody else I know who's saying the cocktail conference is dead and shutting all that down too.
Yeah.
I'm like, did you just say that out loud?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's dead. I don't think anything was believed. Like, we're all just got into it. You know, like, you know what's going on? This is our life, the revolution. I think it's just more like, you guys said, you're bored. Some people are bored, right? You've learned all there possibly could be, you know. There's always something new to learn. But it's just nice having something else. Like beer is the next frontier. Or maybe wine is.
Beer cocktails exist for.
What?
Yeah, beer cocktails.
So, been a bootleg in 3 years. Wasn't until a couple more years ago in Birmingham, but the beer laws loosened up in 2011. It doesn't want to allow anything over 5% these days.
Wow.
So 2011 hit, and it was beer central. And, you know, Alabama has a ridiculous amount of breweries per capita because of that. The cocktail culture has been on in a strong way from here in the next 2 years ago.
Wow.
So now we have the beer nerds who are getting the cocktails.
I wonder if part of the difference too is just Southern beer has been so shitty for so long.
Yeah, that's another question.
That we're barely now starting to get Southern beer that's like not water.
Yeah.
I don't know, I wonder if that would be.
I feel like in New York, New Jersey, like the beer people are the beer people, the cocktail people are the cocktail people, and the wine people are the wine people.
It's true.
And then there's a little bit of a cross section of people who can be like, I can appreciate anything that's like cool, good, or shitty sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, you have both.
Yes,
it's like bartenders and like general, like kind of cool, like, you know, foodie, like wine people. But everybody else is definitely their own thing. Like my roommate, like, is super into craft beer, and like, I mean, I would be talking a foreign language to talk about like what I do, you know. Meanwhile, like, you know, he goes and brews beers on the weekends with his like his brother. You know, it's very interesting how different it is in everybody's
And everybody's mind. You're right. It's a very unique.
Right? Like,
Yeah, it's a very unique. I think every state. I mean, Jeffrey's seems to be a combination of both.
Jeffrey is a combination of both, but we do have 2 actual separate physical bars, and I do put out beer cocktails to get beer people into drinking cocktails, and I actually use names that are like related to beers. Like I had a Hudson River Sour that people were ordering because sour was in the title, and they're familiar with sours from craft beer, so it wasn't as foreign to them to like use some of these terms. To name
it's kind of
cocktails.
like when you get a cocktail virgin, you know, trying to drink cocktails, and you have to use something that's very, you know, you're slowly taking them along. Like, trust me, you know, as you bring them slowly in that path, and then slowly, eventually, you give them a Negroni. It's like mind blown. Like, whoa, I didn't even know I could drink that. But like, I mean, imagine drinking, like, I mean, the next step they're trying to do in beer is like the Jillian, they're putting that on, they want to serve beer like wine.
Yeah.
So like having that as part of the beer pairing, I mean, one of the, Daniel Balud, he has an entire, he actually sells this beer and the whole Sour Sisters under the wine menu, under vintage, it's called vintage beer. And it's in the wine portion, and he sells it by the glass and by the bottle. So it's
At a place earlier this year I was at where we worked with the pastry chef to do a large format dessert where it was for 4 people and you bought it with a bottle of cider.
Oh, that's
the whole thing was like a built-in pairing before the booth and like got it, shit was dope. Like,
yeah, it's a good pairing.
getting people to start thinking about that was cool.
Putting food and beer together is such a natural.
I also think that a lot of people feel the need like, oh, I should have a beer cocktail on my menu, or I should have some beer cocktails, and they're really shitty. Like I've had a lot of really awful beer cocktails.
I've had a lot of regular
like people are
awful
just doing it
cocktails.
because they feel like they should have one on there as opposed to, you know, like actually thoughtfully making like cocktails with beer on.
Just don't know the beer.
Because they end up, with whatever it is, you know. I don't
But
know.
that's true for everything, isn't it? I mean, how many in New York City, there's so many like bars that are now serving cocktails, right? And you go in there and like nobody's trained the staff, like, you know, they're using fresh lime juice, they ticked all the boxes, but then they don't know how to put everything together, and so it's like, yeah, I'm not ordering. You watch them, and you're like, like, and you have to walk away from the bar because every part of you is cringing as you're watching them make the drink, and you're like, oh shit, just should order a beer and a shot, right? So it's the same. It's the same. I think it's a slow process, so one step at a time.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys. I have to